diets. It actually is a very big religious movement in the country that was happening in the 1800s and was spread across the world. And they thought that animal products, and this is the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that you couldn't, you were impure if you were eating another animal. And so the only way they could get people off of meat was to get people something else to eat. And so we needed cornflakes, and that's where it all kind of started with. But you couldn't get people off the bacon and eggs until we started convincing them that, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and you need to have a, good, healthy corn or grain product, Wheaties or cornflakes, to make that all happen. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church is one of the largest processed food manufacturers in the world. They own most of the soy crops that are grown around the world, and they are so in bed with a number of the dietary associations, because virtually every dietitian association created around the world, and this is where, I love history. It was my favorite subject growing up, and I could live and have. I kind of, after 10 years, I burned through every program that the History Channel had years ago,
right. Yeah.
And there was no reason to keep watching it because they didn't have anything new for me. But so I actually learned some of this back then, but was able now to connect the dots with all of it. And it just winds up that every dietitian association across the country was founded by a Seventh-day Adventist religious church member.
Yeah, you're talking
and that's
about
why
the Great Awakening.
They don't want, absolutely, and that's why they don't want there to be animal products anywhere and are demonizing it. And so much of the dietitian textbooks and the nursing textbooks, they were all written by these Seventh-day Adventists. And I don't care if somebody's Seventh-day Adventist. That's like saying I care what religion somebody has. I don't care. But when all of a sudden they're polluting with really non-existent weak science, the textbooks, and training everybody in one way, and then the medical schools start adopting this stuff, and all of a sudden a doctor has this huge disconnect from understanding the basics of metabolism in the Krebs cycle, and how the body uses the mitochondria uses ATP to create energy, and all of a sudden, and they understand how there are things called essential fatty acids that we need, and vitamins and minerals, but so they're taught all of that, and then they're taught like 2 hours of, well, here's a healthy diet and everything, and it doesn't square with the biology, and they're like, well, just don't worry about it, this is all right. They're never taught the science behind where all that came from, because if you actually look into it, there's almost no real quality science on that. Science has been so hijacked by corporate interest these days, and we're seeing it play out right now in front of us all day long with the pandemic that's happening right now. The reason why we're all freaked out over what's going on, well, we're starting to realize that 97% of people who get this coronavirus, they're going to weather it for the most part just fine. In fact, 60% of the people are never going to know that they had anything because they never felt it. They have a healthy immune system. Unfortunately, our older population and here's where the 2.5% population comes in, that has underlying metabolic diseases, coronary artery disease, hypertension, obesity. These things are happening inside of them already. They're most likely going to be what's going to eventually kill them, because that's what eventually kills most of us. Heart disease is the number one killer. And even if we got everybody to eat properly, through age, it's still going to eventually be the number one killer, even if we all ate perfectly. But, the average age, 81 of those that are dying with 2 or more comorbid conditions, and usually great obesity. That's what's happening. And I posted this morning, or actually yesterday, one of the people that I follow heavily is an individual from the Irish Heart Awareness Foundation, and his name is Ivor Cummins. And he's just brilliant when it comes to metabolism, how it creates coronary artery disease and type 2 diabetes and hypertension and everything like this. And he just did an all-cause mortality paper, or not paper, but he crunched the data from all the different sources around the world and said, hey, look at what's happening. And that's just a 15-minute one. And then he was just interviewed in England this morning, and I watched that hour-long one. So, yeah, I'm a little obsessed with all of this. I spend way too much time watching YouTube channel and or channels on YouTube and scientific presentations. And a year ago, my wife's like, I'm going to have you committed. All you want to do is watch science all day. I go, I know. I just can't believe how screwed up we've been. And thank God I've got a lot of friends that are doctors, and some of them have actually very much kind of come around to this. One of them, because I shot you my paper and I shot you another paper that was written by a local cardiologist. Do you remember seeing
Ryan.
that one as well?
Yeah, Ryan Coley.
Yeah, would you? Yeah, so Ryan and I grew up tennis players. He was from Grafton. I was from, obviously, Menominee Falls. And we used to take tennis lessons at Mequon Racket Club together. I went and played tennis at Whitewater. He's a year or two younger. He went and played for the Badgers. And he's now a cardiologist. And last year we were on the court together, and his younger brother turns to me and says, hey, Brett, did you hear about Ryan's heart attack? I look at him because he's been thin as a rail since the day I've met him. And I go, well, what's going on with that? And he's like, well, we have this genetic thing. Our dad died of a heart attack in his 50s, which is why I became a cardiologist. We have this Lp(a), which is a subfaction of cholesterol. It's part of an LDL cholesterol profile. LDL is made up of many different little things. And I'm like, well, what are you doing for that? I go, because I found out just like 2 months before that I myself, 12 years ago, I took a CT heart scan and determined that I had 4 clean arteries. A year ago, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of throwing 3 different stories into one here, but when I changed careers and got back into the corporate wellness or the disease management world, I was like giving myself high fives because I'm like, oh my God, Brett, this is so awesome. I'm going to be 56 and now I'm about to be 57. A year later, and I'm like, hey, I'm not on a hypertension, I'm not on a statin, I'm about to be thin again, all of my blood cholesterol chemistries are just going perfect. And then I said to myself, because I'm watching and following all the science, I go, I can't celebrate just because of that, because I could, because half of guys who die of a heart attack have perfect cholesterol levels and are thin.
Yeah, they look
so
like
I'm
it,
like,
right?
So, I go, so they look great.
Yeah.
And so I go, well, until I go get another CT heart scan and I blow 4 zeros, meaning I have, no plaque in my arteries coming into my heart, then I'm all great. And so I go and get one, and I realize that, oh my God, in 12 years, I went from having no plaque in my arteries that Aurora called me up and said, Mr. Smith, you've got a score of 256. And I'm like, it was big time deflator. And, I was like a little down in the dumps for a day, and that was on a Friday. And then Monday, one of the the YouTube broadcasts that I watched, Ivor Cummins from the Irish Heart Awareness Foundation, he presents this, or has a guy by the name of Patrick Tuitt on his show, on his podcast, and they're presenting how do you reverse coronary artery disease and reverse calcification in the arteries. And I'm like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And so I took a couple 100 hours extra, and I was about 300 hours in just to where that journey started 5 months earlier to where it was at that point. But the next 200 hours only into coronary artery disease. And that's when I start talking to my friend, the cardiologist, about his little heart attack. And I'm like, so what did you guys change? What are you doing different now? And he goes, well, we both became vegetarians. And I'm going, wow. I go, I'm really big into the science right now. I don't understand how eating red meat and fat goes and turns into plaque in arteries. I don't understand the physiology of that. Please tell it to me, and I'll be a vegetarian with you tomorrow. He's like, oh, well, he's like stammering, and he can't really answer it for me. And he goes, well, all the medical research and everything out there, everything's about plant-based these days. And I go, I understand, but I think it's incredibly misguided. You can eat and be healthy being plant-based. I'm not arguing that. And I eat a lot of vegetables and some berries. But I go, but I also believe that the red meat and the fats and the fishes are all great for us, as long as it's not the polyunsaturated fats, the vegetable oils. Well, after 2 months of me sharing information with him, he goes and books an appointment with who he believes is the leading lipidologist in the state of Wisconsin. Doesn't accept insurance, $500 an hour to meet with her.
Wow.
And 2-hour minimum first appointment. And so they're going through the interview, and he tells me about this months later, and it doesn't tell me as he's doing it. But he's, they're like going through, and he goes, well, I don't eat red meat. She goes, why? It's the most bioavailable, nutriently dense food you can eat. And he goes, He goes, well, I'm a vegetarian. I do a lot of whole healthy grains. She goes, there's nothing whole or healthy about a grain. It all drives up your glucose. It takes your cholesterol and turns it into, from pattern A, the large, buoyant, healthy pattern, to the atherosclerotic problem of being small, dense. And drives up your LP little a. And he's like, you're starting to sound a lot like my friend Brett. And she goes, well, it sounds like your friend Brett really understands the science of what's going on. And so after that appointment, he turns around and starts doing things more like how I eat and everything, brings the red meat back in and brings his carbs way down. And within 2 months gets a new blood test, completely reversed, took his pattern B, small dense, made it all pattern A, cholesterol, LDL pattern. And LDL by itself is not there is no such thing as good or bad cholesterol. All cholesterol is necessary. That's why your body almost every cell in your body makes cholesterol. And it's how every structure inside every cell wall of our body is made from cholesterol. And when we scratch our hand and we get a scab, we don't look at that as a negative thing. Well, that's cholesterol that's in that scab. And when our inside of our arteries get damaged through smoking, through pollution, through many different things, excessive blood pressure, excessive cortisol stress levels, excessive insulin, excessive vegetable seed oils, all of these things become a toxic brew inside of our cardiovascular system. And once they scar that inside of that artery, then the LDL gets sent in, just like a firefighter gets sent to a fire to put out the fire. The LDL, it's like blaming firefighters for being at fires is what blaming cholesterol for heart disease is. In fact, in every world calculator that exists, even the American Heart Associations, they don't even ask to plug in what your LDL level is because it's not a freestanding risk profile. But what do we all believe is the number one driver of heart disease? Cholesterol. And what's the bad cholesterol? LDL. And that's where I was reading all of this stuff, and I'm like, and watching all of this stuff, and I'm like, that doesn't hold water anymore. The science of when we came up with that back in the 50s from Dr. Ansel Keys from University of Minnesota, and the diet heart hypothesis and the 7-country study, we didn't even understand that there were a thing called lipoproteins back in those days. So we just had this really simple explanation that, it's just like pouring grease down, a cold stovepipe. It's going to collect in your arteries and it's going to be a problem. Well, that's not how it works grease doesn't run through our veins. It gets broken down and metabolized. Anyhow, so with all of that, Ryan goes in 2 months, changes his diet, gets a new blood test, drives his LP little a down by 80%, reverses his LDL cholesterol from small dense, which is problematic, a large buoyant, which is the beneficial. And he's just like, oh my God, Brett, everything you've shared with me, I've gone and researched it all, and it all 100% holds up. We are so screwed up. And he's on the court all the time, and he's like, I can't believe how screwed up healthcare is, because he'll just look at me, and we just kind of have little jokes going back and forth between us when we're on the court. But so then I told him in October, when he finally got around to telling me this, that, hey, I've confirmed everything that you've shared with me, and you were 100% right. And I go, it's not that I'm right. I didn't do the science. I'm just collecting the data and the science that's out there. And it's not me doing it. I'm going and finding the experts. Thank God we live in a time where you can go on YouTube and watch thousands of hours of quality science. Unfortunately,